metal is dead. Well, that's a statement and a comment that I've seen and heard for years now, right? So stay tuned while I dive into that a little bit and throw in my 2 cents. All right, hey everybody, Sean here with Some Dude in Texas, and welcome back. And if you're new to the channel, hey, thanks for stopping by. So, question is metal dead? For me, short answer is no. Now, hopefully for my, not so long explanation on this. In the early 80s all the way up to, the early 90s, there was a harder style of music being played, right? That some people may consider metal. Bands like, White Snake, Poison, Warrant, Def Leppard, even AC/DC and Van Halen, right? But, that was more kind of radio friendly, more on the harder rock. Metal has never really been mainstream, right? It hasn't been something that's always been out in the open like that, right? It was always kind of underground. Now, there were some radio stations, like down here in Texas, we had Z-Rock, and I think it was kind of spread around to other areas. Now they would play some heavier stuff, especially at nighttime. We also had like a local channel that was lower down on the dial that would like once a week really play some heavy stuff, right? But for the main part, metal has always kind of been, underground or, not mainstream. A lot of people think, that it died, back in the early 80s, when different genres of rock, hard rock, metal, or whatever started evolving. A lot of people blame the hair metal, glam metal movement for that. Even the early 90s, grunge. A lot of people think that Nirvana was that, big meteor that crashed in and destroyed the metal earth, right? Uh, Music evolves, right? Even though what we were hearing on the mainstream, on the local channels, and even on MTV wasn't, that, what is considered metal, but it was still kind of a foundation of it, right? It evolved from that. Um, you know, believe it was still always there. Look at some of the founding bands, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Dio, right? Those bands all throughout the 80s, even through the 90s, were still putting out, maybe not so much Black Sabbath, but we're still putting out albums, right? Dio was putting out albums all the way up to the 2000s. Same thing with Iron Maiden and Judas Priest as well. So it always been there. I'm just using those bands, right, as an example. But once again, metal had evolved, right? All through the 90s. You had bands like Pantera, man. They took it at kind of a different level. Even though they didn't play all their heavy stuff on the radio, you still heard songs like Walk, Cowboys from Hell, things like that on there, which normally you didn't hear. That was kind of a lot more heavier, man. They kind of carried that torch through the 90s. And then you had bands like Slipknot. Now, Metallica got a little bit more radio friendly, and you were hearing them. Same thing with Megadeth. They were more of the thrashier end of the metal spectrum, right? But they softened up a little bit, and they were getting out there on the mainstream. But like I said, during the early 2000s, you had bands like, Pantera, Slipknot. Then the early 2000s, then you had bands like Lamb of God. Man, they were just, crushing it, right? They really took it up to that level, and, playing that heavier style of metal. And then the internet happened, right? That just opened up a big window. Before, here in the States, we pretty much got what was fed to us, through the radio or MTV. Once the internet came through and we started hearing all these other bands from all over the world, different countries and stuff, it just really, I think, catapulted metal. Really kind of had everybody, opened up everybody's eyes to it. Back in the day, when I was younger, it was hard, finding some of these new metal bands and getting, getting it right. It was kind of hard to get the imports and stuff like that unless there was shops that had it. But, Our ways were either, word of mouth, our friends told us about a band, magazines, or just going to the record store. Back then, you had your Sound Warehouse, your Sam Goody, Hastings, or Tower Records, whatever you preferred. You'd go in there and just spend hours, flipping through the records and looking at all the different metal bands or what they had labeled, and checking out those album covers, man. And, oh man, that looks heavy, looks cool, and you would buy it that way. Or walking that wall of cassettes, man, just looking at all the different bands there. You'd look at see if it had like a metal name. Well, that's all gone. Yeah, there's some little record stores and stuff like that, but now we got something, I think, that makes it a lot easier. The internet, we get on there and we still letting our fingers do all the work, but instead of flipping through albums and looking at walls of cassettes, we're able to see it all right there, right? So that opens up that world, man. Even word of mouth, man, that is run rampant, throughout the internet. If you're looking at videos, other social media, word spreads quickly about different bands. And then, like I said, especially with like music streaming, sites now. If what you thought was metal was back in the 80s, right, and you think it died because there's no more other bands like that, go to these music streaming sites like Amazon, Google, Spotify, even YouTube, and even Apple Music. You look up those bands. The majority of those sites are going to give you recommendations of other bands, right? Either bands that were around that same time or newer bands that sound like it. And then you can just go from there, man. You can go down a rabbit hole from there. So that's, I think, helps as well. But I think if you're looking at just what you have locally, your local radio stations, if you're dialing in a 98 point whatever, expecting to hear metal or something newer, from these bands, I just don't think it's going to happen, right? You're going to hear on the classic rock channels, you're going to hear the Motley Crues, the Rats, Judas Priest, Maiden. You're going to hear all the older stuff, the classic stuff, the Ozzy, even the Dio, some of the Metallica, you'll hear that. But if they're putting out new music, or if there's new bands that have that, sound, you're not going to hear it. If you do have Sirius XM, there are channels there that do play new music and play, traditional metal, harder metal, whatever you want, any genre, you can pretty much find it there. But, you just have to look for it, right? So, in conclusion, to me, is metal dead? No. It is if you let it die, right? You got to do a little bit of legwork. It is out there, man. There are many, many, many bands. Like I said, if you like Maiden, if you like Priest, or any of those early metal bands, I guarantee there's a band out there right now that sounds like it, right? Or you can find the stuff that you like and listen to it. But that torch has been passed so many times. There are so many bands out there all over the country, playing that style of metal, playing newer style, and just evolving. I just don't see how you could say metal is dead, right? It is strong. You just have to know where to look. So that's it. That's my 2 cents. Hopefully all this rambling and gum flapping made some sense. But let me know what y'all think, man. Please leave comments. Let me know what y'all think of the future or the status of metal, right? So once again, man, I appreciate y'all watching. And as always, till next time, y'all take care.